Hi, I'm Nathan Blunheis, and I'm excited to talk about my paper, No Community Can Do Everything, Why People Participate in Similar Online Communities. This is a project that was in collaboration with Charles Keene, Isabella Brown, Laura Levy, Nicole McGinnis, and Benjamin Mako Hill. People often participate in several online communities at once. This might seem like an obvious point, but it has some important implications. First, overlapping communities can affect each other's growth, as I showed in another paper that was at CSCW this year, and as prior work has also found. Hate speech and toxicity diffuse through online communities, as do other forms of culture. Online communities with similar topics often have similar users. So these are some interesting facts about overlapping online communities that come from prior quantitative research. But this research has a hard time explaining why people form online communities that overlap in the first place. Why are the same individuals talking to each other about similar things in different online communities? We searched for answers to this research question through an interview study, and this required finding people and talking to them, people who participate in overlapping online communities. And this is kind of challenging, and we solved this problem by using a visualization, a clustering algorithm of subreddits that have overlapping users, and then recruiting active members of those communities. And I'm going to show you that visualization briefly now. So here's the visualization, and we see this cluster of subreddits related to drag and RuPaul's Drag Race, the TV show. And down here, there's another cluster of subreddits related to podcasting. And if we zoom out, we can see that there's a vast universe of subreddits, most of which are in clusters. So we used the visualization to pick out 9 groups of subreddits that we thought were suitable contexts for the study. And we chose these contexts in order to provide a wide range of different topics, potentially different types of people. We also chose topics that we thought would be reasonably comprehensible to our research team. We interviewed a total of 20 participants from these clusters. The participants received a $20 gift card in compensation. And we used a ground theory methodology, so we recorded and transcribed the interviews, and we did multiple stages of coding, generating over 950 codes and 18 thematic memos. And then we synthesized a theory in terms of the types of benefits that people seek in participation in online communities, and then trade-offs between these benefits that create the need for multiple communities. So the benefits are, first, specific types of information and content. Second, a tight-knit homophilous community of similar people. And large audiences for content and creations. And I'm going to give some brief examples of each of these benefits. For specific types of content, this is a quote that comes from a member of the rock climbing subreddits, and they describe how there's 2 different subreddits with different purposes. There's a general purpose rock climbing subreddit that has all types of rock climbing content and discussion, but people looking for in-depth conversations about training for rock climbing will find them more in the specialized our Climb Harder subreddit. When people ask about training in the main subreddit, they get told, hey, you're welcome to ask this here, but you might get more and better responses at our Climb Harder. For an example of how people are looking for homophilous communities, and this can also start building some intuitions about why there'd be multiple subreddits that overlap. We have a quote from a member of subreddits about drag performance and culture, and this describes how they actually don't identify as much with a larger subreddit about RuPaul's Drag Race, because most of them are, I think, white gay men or straight women who see drag with a very narrow view of what drag is. That limits what you would consider pretty or what you would like or what you enjoy. And this individual strongly identified with a smaller horror-themed community called Our Dragula because it embraced transgressing hegemonic beauty norms. Now, to sort of explain why people want a large audience, part of this is that it can turn to material benefits, like it can send traffic to someone's website that help them sell their art. But there's also a thrill that comes from finding a large audience and attention from that audience. As this interviewee describes, if you can get something that gets a hold up there, say on our painting, and it stays on the front page for a while, if it gets into the top 5, and I've had a handful do that, that's kind of cool. So we have tensions between these types of benefits, and I want you to imagine each type of community being on somewhere on this Venn diagram. So if a community would be in quadrant A, it would provide specific content to a large audience, but it would not do as much of facilitating homophilous community. and this is because of trade-offs between the benefits, which I'm going to walk through now. First, large audiences create background noise. And this was an idea that was held by many of our interviewees, and that they thought that larger subreddits were simply not the best place for enthusiasts to have discussion. As this interviewee describes, this background noise problem building in our climbing, the main climbing community, which has just become less and less interesting and less relevant as it's gotten bigger. And so they end up finding more of their discussions that they want to be a part of with other enthusiasts in smaller subreddits, more specific ones. Second, large groups also make homophily more difficult. And this can not just be because it's more difficult to, the identity group is less focused, but also because of how people carry themselves as they move between different environments. This interviewee likened big subreddits to big cities where people ignore each other, and smaller subreddits to small towns where people will chat with each other just because they're there. The big subreddits might seem unfriendly, they say, but it's not that so much. Individual members aren't polite or unfriendly. It's actually as though people carry themselves differently when they're in different subreddits. Okay, so those are the first two tensions, and here's the third, and that is the tension between homophilous community and specific content. And this often happens when the type of content or information people are looking from is made by people who are different from them. So in this quote, an American describes visiting the Drag Race UK subreddit, where there's a lot more understanding about a particular British drag queen, about where they come from. And this is because of cultural differences between British culture and American culture that are relevant to drag. And this American visits a subreddit that's mainly about British culture in order to learn. Similarly, a mixture of experts and beginners provides a better learning environment than a group of beginners alone. So in sum, no community can do everything. Now, that might be something of an overstatement because these tensions aren't necessarily insurmountable. There's no logical reason for this. But it seems that, at least on Reddit, the easiest way to deal with the limitations of one community is to create a complementary one, or maybe join a complementary one. And so now I want to talk a little bit about the question of, are online communities competitors and mutualists? And I mentioned another project earlier, and in that project I found that highly overlapping communities are mutualistic more often than they are competitive. But that was a quantitative project, and it had that evidence didn't provide much of an explanation for why mutualism would be more common than competition. These interviews help triangulate that finding and also provide an explanation, and that is that instead of building complex communities that try to meet all needs, sort of trying to expand the niche of one big community, instead people build several related communities that each specialize in a different niche. So in conclusion, I think I want to point out how some received wisdom in social computing maybe overemphasizes competition. Resnick et al. Recommend new online communities carve out a useful and defendable niche in the ecology of competing communities. And that could be an important point, but I think it's also important to not be so afraid of competition between existing communities, because no community can do everything. And therefore, we should design for people to participate in ecosystems of overlapping communities. This might mean formalizing, recommending, or automating some of the social practices like cross-posting or cross-linking that promote multi-community participation that came up in our study. Thank you. There's my contact information on this slide. Thanks to my committee, thanks to the NSF, and thanks to my collaborators especially.